Welcome to the Entrepreneur Master Series. I am the real Jason Duncan. We have a very special guest today on the series. Today, we're recording this live on October the 11th, 2022. And I'm really glad that you're here. I'm going to introduce the guest in just a moment. We're going to get started, but we do release this on my podcast, The Root of All Success, at a later date. So if you're happening to listen to this on The Root of All Success, I want to encourage you to come and visit these live. Come to these live webinars. I do these every couple of weeks. The Entrepreneur Master Series is designed and curated to be a 90-minute live webinar specifically for entrepreneurs just like you to learn about things that can make their entrepreneurial experience better. In the case of today's episode, we're going to be talking about creating generational wealth through real estate investing as an entrepreneur. So twice a month, I do this. I bring in an expert, like we've got Avery Carl on the show today, which I'll introduce her in just a minute. But twice a month, I bring in a top expert in some related field to entrepreneurship, whether it's around leadership, financial literacy, sales, entrepreneurship in general, whatever it happens to be. And what we try to do in this 90 minutes together is we deliver you a masterclass of what you need to know on that particular topic. And of course, like I said, we release these as an extra episode on The Root of All Success, which you can check out at therootofallsuccess.com. But if you want to register for any of the future Entrepreneur Master Series, EMSs, as we call them, you can go to therealjasonduncan.com/EMS. So that is what this is about. Let me tell you about today's webinar. Let me tell you about what we're doing today. The topic today, the title of this webinar is Learn to Make Millions with Short-Term Rentals from Someone Who's Made Billions. And that B word there is really important. And we're going to talk about what that means and how real that actually is with Avery in just a second. But Avery Carl is my guest today. And she went from making $37,000 in a salary to a real estate investment portfolio of over 100 doors in just 5 years. How did she do that? Well, you're going to join me today, and we're going to figure out how she did that. She's the author of Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, Your Guide to Analyzing, Buying, and Managing Vacation Properties. She's the host of the Short-Term Show podcast. And like I said, she went from $37,000 a year to 100 doors in 5 years. And she talks about that in her book. She talks about it on her podcast. She was actually a guest on my podcast not too long ago. You can go check out the archives at therootofallsuccess.com. But her strategy on getting these short-term rentals and long-term rentals, but mostly short-term, allowed her to grow her portfolio much more quickly than just starting off with long-term rentals like a lot of people do. The Short-Term Shop, which is her company, has helped over 4,500 families create generational wealth through real estate investing. And today, I am pleased to bring onto the show Avery Carl. So, Avery, go ahead and turn your camera on, and let's talk to these fine folks. How you doing?
Good. How are you? I'm getting over being sick, so I'm going to apologize for any nasaliness today. Sorry about that, guys. I know it's annoying.
It's all right. It's all right. Well, you know, Avery, you and I met, I think if I remember correctly, it was a marketing agency out of New York that both of us have used in the past. And they said, you know, you guys ought to know each other. And you used to live in Nashville. I'm living in Nashville. And now you're down on 38 down in Florida. But I think that's how we originally met. And then I was so impressed with you and your story and what we talked about on my podcast. I've gone out and bought me a cabin in the mountains.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure I used to live right across the lake from you.
Oh, really? Were you in Mount Juliet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're in Gallatin. So just north of Nashville, Mount Juliet. Mount Juliet's kind of the city between the lakes, right? They got Old Hickory on the north side and then Percy Priest on the south side there. So
yeah. We were on the north side. We were our house wasn't on the lake, but it was right across the street.
Yeah. Well, that's when we lived, we don't live close to it now, but when we first moved to Gallatin, we had a house on the neighborhood was on the lake, but we lived kind of across the street too. So, but it's always nice to be on the water, but you moved to much more prettier water than Old Hickory Lake. Nothing against Old Hickory Lake, but no. The beaches of 38 are certainly prettier than Lagardo.
Yeah, they are, pretty, I would say, incomparable, at least on the continental U.S.
You know, I'm not much of a beach person. My wife loves it. She just got back from Perdido Key, I think is where she was with her
Okay.
family. Just came back a couple weeks ago, but she said it wasn't as pretty there as it is Destin 30A area. But I'm not much of a beach guy, but even I can tell there's a huge difference from Atlantic Coast, Florida, or even Myrtle Beach, or any of the beaches along the Atlantic coast, and then 30A, the Destin area. We love to go down to Destin. As a matter of fact, we're going down. I think next month we're going to be there for 9 days, taking our RV. We're staying right across the street from the beach. We love it down there, and you've just made it home. So you
Yep.
like living there better than Nashville area?
I do. I love it here. It would be pretty hard not to love.
Yeah. Well, you're in a pretty cool place there, and your husband Luke, you guys have got something pretty cool going down there. So let's do this. So the idea of this particular webinar today, Avery, is we want to give the listeners the insight into what it's like to truly own and invest in short-term rentals and how to make money from that, because you've done this to the degree of the B word, the billion, which I said in the intro. And I remember, if I remember correctly, when we talked on my podcast, which I think we recorded, golly, it's been a long time ago. You were predicting that 2022, if I remember, was going to be the first year that you guys would cap, or you would go over the $1 billion mark in sales in an annual year. Is that right?
That is right. As of right now, our trailing 12 is over $1 billion, but we will also hit it for the calendar year of 2022. So
Wow.
It's pretty cool. A lot of hard work though.
Well, it's amazing. And you got started, how many years ago did you get started?
About 6.
Listen, people, if you don't think it can happen, you got this amazing lady here, Avery Carl, 6 years ago, starts into this idea of, well, I want to invest in some real estate and I want to start a real estate company, and $1 billion. Do you guys understand what the difference between $1 million and $1 billion is? This illustration I got from somebody a long time ago. If you think about the term million and you put it into seconds, like 1 million seconds is 11 days. 11 days. 1 billion seconds. How many days do you think that? Have you ever heard this, by the way?
I have not. No, I'm really interested. To hear
How many
about to say
days do you think 1 billion seconds is?
I don't know.
So if 1 million's 11, how many days do you think a billion is?
I don't know. Math is not my thing. I'm more of a marketing, like creative. So you just tell me.
32 years.
32 years. Oh, I was thinking you were about to say 30 days.
No, 32 years. So there's lots of people that sell them. I remember back when I was in my early 20s watching real estate people like, ooh, I hit the $1 million club, hit the $1 million, sold $1 million in 1 year in real estate. Listen,
that's 2 sales.
That's nothing. That's nothing. So congratulations to you. So tell me a little bit, just give a little bit of background on the short-term shop and how you got that started and what you guys specialize in. Then we'll get into some nuts and bolts.
Sure. So I started the short-term shop on our second short-term rental purchase, mainly because, well, for 2 reasons. One, because my husband is a terrible client and he was constantly embarrassing me in front of real estate agents. So I was like, I'm just going to get my own license and do our deals. I don't make any money anyway. So if I'm doing our own deals, then, that'll be some extra income for us. So that'll be great. And the shop kind of came into being by accident because we realized there weren't really any agents in the space when we were buying that could answer even our most basic questions about how to choose a property as a short-term rental or how to run a short-term rental in any capacity, or even just basic questions like, hey, how do you find a cleaner for this thing? How much do you think this is going to make? So it started with just friends of ours saying, oh, you're making how much on that cabin? I want one. You're an agent, right? Help me find one and teach me how to do this. So started like that. And then it became more friends, and then it became friends of friends. And then it became truly clients, people that you don't know, that I didn't know. And then it just grew from there. And I really tried to fight it too, because I thought, man, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into only doing short-term rentals as an agent. The real money's in selling the big primary homes and not investments. And I was just trying to fight that so hard, trying to be everything to everyone in terms of a real estate agent. And finally, I quit doing that because this is a really silly story, kind of. A friend of mine sent her parents to me and they fired me. I just sold I think like $25 million worth of real estate in the Smokies as short-term rentals. Her parents fired me because I didn't know where to find the serial number. It's not even called a serial number. It's called a certificate of something, something. I didn't know where to find that on a $50,000 mobile home. They fired me after I just sold all of this. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do primary homes anymore. I'm making all of this money. I'm making all of these, I'm having so much success over here doing this investment stuff that I'm trying to not pigeonhole myself into. I'm just going to go all in on that. It's not pigeonholing. It's, going all in. And as soon as I did that, the business just kind of exploded. And what we do, so we only work with short-term rental buyers and sellers. We don't take any other type of client. So if you want to buy a long-term primary home, we're sending you elsewhere. And that's all we do all day, short-term rentals. And it just grew quickly. And we opened up more now in 15 markets in 8 states. And all of our clients who come to us to buy, we also put them through a training program and teach them how to manage their short-term rental. And we do that for free if you buy the house with us. So basically, and we do it all while you're under contract, Jason, because you just bought with us. So we do all that while you're under contract so that by the time you close, you have a really good idea of what you're doing so that when closing day rolls around, you're pretty ready to go to start making money.
Well, I can vouch for you guys. I'll give a shout out to both it's Rush Valentine, right? I got his name right.
Yep.
He was the guy that we used down in Florida, and we will buy one in Florida. We had a contract on one back in January, February, fell through because of some of the inspection issues, and then we hit pause because I thought I wanted to buy a motorcycle dealership. And I wasted lots of time and money on that. And then I used one of your agents, Matt Castle, in the Smokies, and Matt helped us locate and find the perfect spot in Sevierville, which is in the Great Smoky Mountains. And we just closed on that on September 22nd. And like the I guess the feelings of signing those paperwork on a property that expensive, that is the most expensive piece of real estate we've ever bought, even including personal residences. We've lived in some nice houses before, but we've never bought one that expensive because we bought a big cabin, and we absolutely love it. We'd love to live there, but it's not what it's for.
Right.
But we're heading, we stayed up there all week last week. We're getting it ready. We're rebuilding the deck, putting a hot tub on it. We remodeled the bathrooms. It was not a short-term rental before. It was a second home. But so we're heading out there. As soon as you and I get done this Zoom today, I'm heading right back, and we're going to spend the rest of the week getting into all the final details. But my success story, which should encourage the listeners, is that we listed it Sunday night on Airbnb and Vrbo. Don't know what we're doing. And by the way, that process was a lot harder than we ever anticipated. Airbnb and Vrbo thing took like 4 hours. I don't know if we're stupid, but it just took forever.
It's just intensive. Yeah.
Well, so we listed it the following morning. Like we woke up the next morning, we had a booking. And we had put that he booked it. The dude that booked it for Thanksgiving week. And we had put the price like double Thanksgiving week and double on Christmas and New Year's week, because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And dude booked it for that week. And I'm like, holy crap. And then we've had 2 more bookings since then. We even had somebody just message us, say, hey, can we get it? Are you going to decorate for Christmas? Which we didn't know we were supposed to do. And so it's not, we don't have enough bookings to pay the mortgage yet, but we're working towards it. It's only 2 days since it went live. So you guys know what you're doing. And the Management Monday workshop that you guys put us through was fantastic. All the documents that you share. So big props, although this whole thing is not really about the short-term shop, but big props on short-term shop for what you guys were able to do for us. You guys killed it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your business. We appreciate that.
Well, we're going to do more. We want to Chrissy and I want to own 4 as soon as possible. Like as soon as we can figure out how to finance them and get them in our portfolio. And then once we get 4, then maybe 24, but we'll see. We'll go 4. Now, what's the difference? Let's go really basic. What's the difference in short-term rentals and long-term rentals?
So short-term rentals are typically, depending on which state you're in, anything under 30 days. And so what I focus on are properties that can be what I would call a true vacation rental. So, you're looking, it's not like traveling, it's not like corporate housing or traveling nurses or anything like that, which is kind of getting lumped into short-term rentals now. It's true vacation markets where people are coming there on a vacation, typically not longer than 7 days. So technically anything under 30 is a short-term rental. Vacation rentals are typically like 7-ish.
Okay. So it's exactly, there's no mystery. A short-term rental is less than 30 days. I think laws change when you rent longer than 30 days. Am I right?
Yes. If you ever rent to anyone longer than 30 days through Airbnb or Verbo, get a real lease signed, because if they stay longer than 30 days or even at 30 days, they now have tenants' rights and they can squat in your property. And if you don't have a lease, then you're in bad shape. So make sure if you're renting 30 days or longer, then you have a real lease signed. Okay.
So short-term rentals, we're talking primarily vacation rentals, which is what my wife and I purchase, is what you guys do. Why are people wanting to do this as opposed to, why short-term over long-term? What's the advantage?
So let me preface that answer with this. So I'm not one of those short-term rental people that's going to tell you short-term rentals are the right and only way. Nothing else is worth investing in. So I actually just closed on my 220th door. So we went up about 100 doors since last time I talked to you.
Wow.
And we're about to sign a contract on what will be another 54 doors. So that'll put us in the 275-ish range. And only 8 of those are short-term rentals. So my strategy and my mindset is the reason people would invest in short terms rather than other types of real estate is because they cash flow so much heavier. For me, I was able to scale my portfolio so quickly because we invested in short-term rentals really heavily at the beginning. So 5 of our first 6 investments were short terms. We still buy short terms. I bought my most recent one about 8 months ago. But we use that cash flow because they cash flow much heavier than just, traditional single family long terms to buy more real estate. Now, whether that's more short terms or long terms or apartment buildings that we've gotten into in the last year, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want to do. But the reason and the strategy behind me investing in short-term rentals is using all that cash flow to be able to grow your portfolio faster than you would any other way.
Yeah, because if you just bought a single family home and you paid $500,000 for it and you rent it out for, I don't know, $2,500 a month, whatever that rent is, you might clear like a few hundred, maybe 1,000 if you got it super cheap or you paid cash for it or something, but you're not going to clear that much. But with the $500,000 short-term rental property, you could clear, what, $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a month, right?
Yeah. And just to give you guys some context, so I do buy single family long-term rentals right now too. And it's really just to make sure I have a good diverse portfolio. And we shoot for like between 350 and 500 cash flow a month on those. Whereas our short terms, our smallest one cash flows at least 2,500 a month. And that's a studio.
That's crazy. What's crazy good. I mean, 2,500 a month. What we're talking? That's what, $33,000 a month, 33,000 a year, something like that.
It depends because of seasonality. So that one actually does damn near $60,000 a year. So in the summertime, it's higher. Wintertime, it's lower.
That is crazy. Well, yeah. I mean, and that's what we're hoping. I mean, we're looking at our property and we're looking at what the mortgage and carrying costs are just for keeping, owning that type of cabin, and we feel like that at the rates that we could rent it for, we could probably, I'm hoping that 50 to 60 grand would be realistic and what we could clear. But I know that the ramp up cost, because it wasn't a short-term rental. So even though it came furnished, a lot of that stuff was crap. No offense to the people who owned it before us, but they didn't, it was like we had to throw out so much stuff and we're having to buy new furniture, new appliances. Well, not new appliances, but we're having to buy new stuff. So the cost to set ours up is a little different. And I know that you specialize. I know when we were talking with Rush and Matt, both of those guys, the real estate agents, were telling us, hey, we're not even going to show you a single family home that somebody lives in to purchase for short-term rental. We're only going to show you either second homes or short-term rental homes so that it's not turnkey. Turnkey's probably a little too much, but it's close to turnkey, right?
Yeah. And the most important thing that you want to remember when you're trying to choose a short-term rental or market, the market you choose is probably the most important piece of the puzzle. It's the most important component. So like if you don't say you don't have a lot of cash and you don't have enough money to pay, another $30,000 to furnish something. Well, if you buy in the right market, pretty much everything's going to come furnished. You can find things where you'll knock that line item off altogether. So a lot of people, when they talk about markets, they only talk about, the regulations and the tourism, but buying in the right market can also cost you less in upfront startup costs, like, buying in the Smokies or on the Emerald Coast. Your example is not that good of an example for this exact scenario because you did do a lot of changes, but a lot of times you can just roll with what's in there because it's already been a short-term rental and it's been being rented the way that it is. And we do something we call letting the renters pay for it. So where we'll just let it roll the way that it is, make some money, and in the off season, then we'll change out the furniture or, change the countertops or whatever it is that you want to do. So market makes a big difference in terms of that furniture expense.
Well, I'll tell you, my wife and I've had some, we'll say, discussions about the living room furniture. The lazy boy, the recliner had to go. Like it was threadbare. It was leather and it had been rubbed. Evidently they had a dog in there that scratched up pretty bad. So we threw that out. But the couch and the love seat were like, they're okay. They're okay. They're not bad. They're comfortable. And she's like, we got to get new furniture. And I'm thinking, look, just rent the thing. I don't think we're going to get a 4-star rating or 3-star rating or a 1-star rating just because the couch isn't 100% up to norm, like up to, looks like it's off the showroom floor. But I think she's winning, and we're going to be buying new living room furniture this week.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like par for the, especially in the Smokies where it's okay to be a little bit grandma. Like, it's not Palm Springs where everything has to be brand new, totally modern, like decorated to the nines. In the Smokies, it's okay to have like the black bear decorations and the kind, that stuff that you wouldn't have in your normal house is kind of okay there as long as it, makes sense for the room.
So what should a person getting into short-term rentals who wants to, and I know a lot of people listening to this are like, hey, I've always wanted to get into short-term, or I'm interested in short-term. What do you have to get into short-term? Because, and I'll preface your answer by saying one of the things I did not realize is that there's DSCR loans, which stands for debt service coverage ratio. And I'll let you explain what that means, but I didn't understand that. It's a little different, even though it's changed a lot because our current administration's nuts and they're changing stuff and they're printing money and it's causing all kinds of havoc in our economy. But you don't have to have as much money down, and they don't look at your income the same way. Like, so what would someone need to think about before they invest in a short-term rental the first time?
So the main two types of financing are really like 1A and B, and then 2. The main two types of financing are going to be conventional financing and then DSCR. So conventional financing, that's going to be the easiest to find. That's your regular old Fannie Freddie. You can find it by Fannie Freddie, I mean Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans that you can find at any bank or mortgage broker across the country. Those you're approved based on your personal debt to income ratio, credit score, all that stuff. They're going to want to see your pay stubs, your taxes, your firstborn kids, blood sample, like all of that stuff. It's also going to have like all that stuff is super annoying, but conventional is always going to have the lowest interest rate. So keep that in mind. It's the easiest to find, always the lowest interest rate. A lot of people don't know this. You can get a conventional investment loan for 15% down. A lot of people think that it's 20% because a lot of banks only allow 20%, but the Fannie Freddie rule is actually 15. So you can get a 15% down loan up to, they just raised the jumbo limit. So you can get a 15% down conventional up to a purchase price of about $845,000. So that's a really great option. It's going to be the easiest. There's also something called a second home loan, also conventional product. So again, based off your personal debt to income, your credit score, all that stuff. And that one, you only have to put 10% down, but you have to stay in the property. It's going to be different with every lender, but typically 14 days out of the year. So it's meant to be used as a vacation home, but you're allowed to rent that out on Airbnb and Vrbo when you're not there. So if it's truly going to be a place like, what you're doing, you're living in Nashville, you're going to hop over there and hang out a certain amount of time out of the year and rent it when you're not there. So that 10% second home is totally allowable. There's some other things in there, some other rules, like you can't put any sort of a contract on it that takes control of the property away from you, like a lease or a property management contract. You can't have more than one in the same market. So you can't go to Gatlinburg and buy 10 vacation homes. Like that would be mortgage fraud. And then it has to be, again, this is not a black and white rule. It's going to be different with different mortgage companies. You typically about 65 miles away from your primary home. So you can't get a loan on the house next door to you as a second home loan. So there's a bunch of rules to make sure that you're operating within the lines. But my advice is if you're like running spreadsheets on something as an investment, I would just go ahead with that 15% down so that you make sure you are well inside the lines, no gray areas, good to go. That was 1A and 1B. Now, part two, the second type of financing is DSCR. So DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. So these types of loans, they do not qualify you based on your own personal debt to income ratio. They do look at your credit score, but these are really good loans for people who have unconventional income, or maybe, you just recently switched from a W-2 to 1099 work and you don't have 2 years of 1099 income to show to get a conventional loan. So you can get a DSCR loan. So what they use to qualify you with a DSCR loan is what the property will make. They need to see that the property's income will cover the debt service, so debt service coverage ratio loan, on a 1-to-1 ratio. So if the mortgage is going to be $2,000, they need to see that it's going to make $2,000 a month. So 1-to-1, 2,000 to 2,000, to give you the loan. The downside of DSCR, well, before I get to the downside, you can have unlimited DSCR loans, whereas conventional, you can only have 10. And as long as you have enough money to keep making those down payments, you can keep getting DSCR loans. Now, it sounds awesome. Everybody's like, sign me up, sign me up. Typically, you have to put 20% down on those, by the way. There were 15% down products like this time last year, but when the economy kind of went a little wacky, they tightened up and took away the 15%. I'm sure it'll come back once things are a little more stabilized, but 20% down. So everybody gets really excited right around this time and explaining what a DSCR loan is. Here's the downside. The bank is going to make their money somewhere, because now they're giving you the loan based on basically nothing, like unicorn rainbow sprinkles. They're giving you the loan based on the idea that you are going to manage it well enough to make enough money to pay the mortgage. So the interest rate's much higher than a conventional loan. So if that's something that still pencils when you're doing your analysis, great. I've seen a lot of people be really successful with DSCR loans. But I also see a lot of people go, oh yeah, I'm going to get DSCR. And they're like, oh man, the interest rate sucks on that. Well, yeah, they got to make money somewhere, dude. Like they're not just handing out free loans. So that's the downside. My advice, get as many conventionals as you can before you move on to DSCR, just to get that cash flow rolling in at the lower interest rate, which no interest rates are technically low compared to last year right now. But those are the two main types of loans that most people use.
Yeah, well, and see, I didn't know DSCR was even a deal, because we had, when we were looking at doing this, I was thinking, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I own several businesses, and on paper, I'm pretty smart. I make sure that it doesn't look like I'm making any money, right, because that's the legal thing I can do through taxes. I can write things off. I think Trump said it when somebody was accusing him of not paying taxes. He said, that makes me smart. I'm just following the code. So I have an unconventional,
to my advantage.
That's right. So I didn't do anything illegal or unethical. I was following the rules, but that also makes it look like I don't make any money when I do make money. So conventional, while it could happen, it would be a proctology exam. I mean, they have to see and I wasn't interested in going through that. So when I found out about DSCR, it's like, let's just do that. Well, holy crap, my interest rate, we closed at 7.5%. I mean, it hurts to say it out loud. That's the highest interest rate on any mortgage I've ever had.
Oh, you don't want to know what they are now.
Oh my gosh, it was terrible. And we paid points to get that. And it was like, oh, it's nuts. But nevertheless, it's never a perfect time to do anything. You just have to adapt. You have to do it. And we bought a phenomenal property, and that property will continue to go up in value. If people are going to rent it, I mean, obviously it's going to rent it, because over the last 24 hours, we had 3 bookings. And so it's going to be fine. We're going to be all right. So
Yeah.
I have to keep telling myself that.
Yeah, well, you're a perfect candidate for something like that. And I think the entire reason that those loans came about is because people who are real estate investors for a living and that's their only income. Well, that nobody who's a professional real estate investor looks like they make any money on paper, but they've got plenty of money to go invest. It doesn't look good to a conventional mortgage broker. So
Yeah.
you're the perfect candidate for that.
Well, so DSCR and we got conventional. So there's two ways you can buy it, but you still got to have the money down. Are there ways to do this? Not with no money down, but with no money out of your pocket. Are there ways that people are doing that where they can not take money out of their pocket to invest?
There's a few ways you can do that. Partnerships are going to be that'll be the first way that I'll talk about. So typically with short-term rental investing, the partnership structure is very simple. There's a money person and a sweat equity person. The money person puts the money down, gets the loan in their name. The sweat equity person does all the management because, it's definitely, I don't want to call it a job because it's not that time intensive, but it's definitely systems that have to be managed. And, you can't just set it and forget it and never look at it again. You can look at it on the beach, but you still do have to pay attention. Where was I going with that?
Partnerships.
Oh yeah, partnerships. Sorry. I've got the sick brain. So partnerships. So money person, sweat equity person is doing all the management. And typically you'll split the profit 50-50. The way that I did it, so we had one partnership on two different properties when we first started. And the way we did it was exactly how I just said. But since we didn't chip in one single dollar on the down payment, we also had a $500 a month mini mortgage, we called it, on top of our 50-50 to our partner until what would have been our half of the down payment was paid off. So partnerships, typically the easiest. Also, you could use the BRRRR strategy, which I'm sure you know what that is, but for any of your listeners who don't, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. I get confused on which R's go where. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So basically that's where you're looking for a property and you would have to come out of pocket up front probably, but you get your money back afterwards in the refinance. So you buy a property that needs rehab, or you not necessarily even rehab, but maybe a property that you can add an extra bedroom to, something where you can add more value. So you buy a property, hopefully at a discount or something that you can make worth a lot more money by adding another bedroom or by doing a rehab. Then you do all that work, whether it's a lot of work or not, depends on the property, and you add that value. In a few months, you go refinance it, you get an appraisal for the higher value after rehab value, and then you pull the money back out. Hopefully it appraises for high enough that you get all of your down payment back. So it's as if you didn't come out of pocket at all because you're getting all your money back. You're getting the down payment, hopefully. And the goal is to get your down payment money and your rehab money back in the refinance. So that would be another way to do it.
Okay, so let's talk about those two ways. So you got the partnership way, which you explained, I think. So I go and I find an Avery Carl and say, hey, Avery, you want to invest? I'll do all that. We'll manage it. We'll do all the communications, but we need $100,000 to buy this property. So you put the 100 in, we manage it. And then whatever profit after all expenses, we split 50-50. So that's one way to do it. And of course, partnerships can be arranged a dozen different ways based on, there's lots of ways to do that, but that's one example. The second way with the BRRRR method, it's you buy it with the money that you got, you put your own 100 into it, you buy it, and then you go in and rehab it and by adding the bedroom, adding the bathroom, adding the hot tub, adding the deck, adding the pool, whatever you got to do to add. And then you rent it out and then refinance it. And then once you refinance, you can pull hopefully that 100 grand back out. Now you got your 100 back, plus you still own the property and it's cash flowing. Take the 100 to go buy another one. That sounds like both of those sound like great ideas. I mean, because either way, you're only spending money once,
right?
And you're not having to spend it two times. On the BRRRR method, typically, and I know every market's different, but typically, how long does it take before you can refinance?
Depends on the type of lending you use up front. So if you're like buying it with a conventional loan, you may have to wait 6 months. It depends on the seasoning period of the lenders that you're working with. Or if you use like a hard money loan or cash, you can refinance it as soon as you're finished doing that rehab. It just kind of depends.
Okay. So does the DSCR versus conventional, is there a benefit or is there a cost of doing one versus the other on the the BRRRR method?
There's not really a difference other than your interest rate and what you may need to put down. So some of the DSCR lenders now, some of the bigger ones are requiring 25% if it's above a certain dollar amount. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for there and what your actual situation is.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was another point I was going to make about that, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think that when we were first talking, and you also have the mortgage shop, which is
Yes.
a sister company to the short-term shop, which does the mortgages for this. If you want to, obviously you don't have to use the mortgage shop but it makes it easier because you're all one kind of thing. But I know that when we first started talking with Lori, I think Lori Duran, I think is her not. I think when we first started talking to her, she was saying, hey, on this particular option, if you do the DSR on this particular lender who's going to do this, there's a prepayment penalty. Like you can't refi, you can't do anything within a certain amount of time. But honestly, now that I think about it, I didn't think about it until just now, is that when I was signing the paperwork, I'm pretty sure there wasn't one. I think ultimately, whatever worked out, it was like, there isn't one. So we could refinance tomorrow if we wanted to.
Yeah. So we do at the mortgage shop, we broker to several DSCR lenders, but there is only one that doesn't have a prepayment penalty. And I remembered the point that I was going to make on that. So when you're getting a DSCR loan, so DSCR loans have existed for a while for long term. There's only a handful of companies that do them for short term. And you want to make sure as you're shopping lenders that you ask upfront, hey, are you using the short-term rental income to qualify, or are you using the 1007, which is the long-term rental that will show up on the long-term rental value that will show up on an appraisal, or are you using that? Because you need to know that up front. You don't want to just go with the lender and like, oh, DSCR, great. And you get 3 weeks into a deal, get the appraisal done only to find out they're using the long-term income and not the short-term. And then they don't approve you because that long-term income is a lot lower than what the short-term would be. And then you're stuck and you may not be able to get that seller to extend for you to find another lender. So make sure you ask that up front if they're using short-term or long-term income to qualify the property.
You know what? I am remembering now during the process that I think that was the issue with one of ours was we had to, when Matt, our real estate agent, was working through this with us, he said that, hey, the report came back. There has to be I think it was a 1007. It was a long-term rental. But luckily for us is that the long-term rental rate came back at like $7,200 a month or something because like I said, this is a pretty good sized cabin in a great location. So that was plenty enough for them to cover, our mortgage obviously is not that much. So it covered and it worked. I'd forgotten that was an issue. So I didn't, now that I know that is something I would want to look at in the future to make sure, hey, are you going to be able to use like the AirDNA or even Short-Term Shop has great data on short-term rental rates versus just what it would rent on the open market for a year or 18 months to somebody. That's a very interesting point that potential investors need to think about. Is there a way, and this is, I probably know the answer to this already, but is there a way on the partnership thing? So say, for example, I want to go in and I want to set up, I want to buy this short-term rental property in 30A, and it's $1.5 million or $2 million on the beach, great property. But I need 4 people to come in. I don't just need one guy. I need 4 because it takes so much money. Like if you need 25% down on $2 million, that's $400,000, right? All right. I might know $500,000. You got to have 500 grand to put down. Maybe I need 4 people. Me plus 4. We all put in 100. Now we've got it. Is there a difference to how that partnership works out because it's a group of people, or no? There's no difference.
There would probably be a little bit of difference in the structure and operations. Like, maybe you guys are taking your owner draws like quarterly or something instead of monthly. I personally, here's my advice when it comes to partnerships. Do as few people as possible per partnership and as few partnerships as possible. And the reason I say that is not because I know everybody's thinking, yeah, because partnerships can go bad and you can hate each other. That's not what I'm about to say. That can happen. The partnership we had was great. But what happened was towards the end of it, we were like, all right, we've got our own cash flow now. We can go buy our own properties. There's not as much meat on the bone on these 2 that we have with our partner. So, we're ready to be our own people now. We're ready to be our own investors and, not have partnerships. So we just said, hey, you want to buy us out? And he did. And I've been actually on a panel before where at a conference where another investor was like, hey, I'm trying to build up this big portfolio and I need partners and everybody come partner with me and buy all these houses with me. I can't think of anything worse than having 1,000 different partners on 1,000 different deals and having to be beholden to thousands of different people, not thousands, but you know what I mean, on all these different properties. If it's the difference, if you can afford to get a 2-bedroom on your own versus a 4-bedroom with a partner, get that 2-bedroom on your own, then you have that cash flow coming in only to you and you can start working your way up. You don't have to answer to anybody. You don't have to ask anybody, hey, how should I respond to this? Or can we do this? Or can we do that? The fridge needs to be replaced. Like, are you going to be really difficult about this? Or are we just going to, get the first one that we can get and not penny pinch? So it just is going to make your life much more efficient to have less partners than more. And I would say buy the smaller house rather than the bigger house with a partner, unless it's just something that has to be done. Like my partnership went great, but I just recommend as few as possible so that you can really be your own person, be your own investor, and, kind of pave your own way.
Well, I wonder if, is there a difference in like a fund, like rather than just partnerships? Like, hey, I want to run a fund on just short-term rentals, for example. And I want to say, hey, if you want to invest in the fund, are there rules around that, investment rules, SEC or anything like that investors would have to look at?
Depending on how you structure it, there will be rules with the SEC. If you're doing like a true syndication, you are going to have to register that. And syndicating single family long terms is kind of difficult in my opinion. I've never done it for this reason. So syndicating big commercial buildings. So let's talk like say a 50-unit apartment building. With apartment buildings, the property's value is determined by how much it makes. That's how commercial real estate works. It's not based on sold comps. Like, oh yeah, there's a 25-unit over there sold for that. It's about how much the property makes. So when you have a fund or a syndication buying a 50-unit apartment building, you can buy one that's not making any money because it's torn up. It needs a bunch of work. You can do all that work and to where it's getting a higher rent and push that income up and you can force the value higher by doing work on an apartment building because of the way that they appraise those. With single family short-term rentals, it's really difficult to do that because they are appraised based on sold residential comps. They're not commercial, they're residential because they're just houses. So the house on the beach that is making $500,000 a year in an appraiser's eyes, in the bank's eyes, is worth the same as the house next door that's not a rental at all. So you don't have a way to force that appreciation to where everybody can get, you could sell it later and everybody makes a bunch of money. Now, that's why I've never tried syndication with short terms, because everybody is like, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? I'm like, I can't be bothered. I don't want to do that. So it makes a lot more sense to do that with a commercial property than with single family short terms. Now you could, if you don't want to build in the exit on it, you could invest just for cash flow and not build in the exit. Like I saw some people trying to syndicate short-term rentals last year when prices were at the highest they've ever been. And they were building in like 8% returns on the sale. They were buying brand new cabins, but those aren't worth more today than they were last year with brand new. There's no way to push the value up any higher than it already is. Yeah. So it's just difficult to do. I'm not saying it's impossible. Somebody's going to come along and figure out a way to do it, but it's just too much for me personally. It works better in the commercial world.
Well, I'm going to take a break in our conversation and talk about the sponsor. We have a brand new exclusive sponsor for the Entrepreneur Master Series. And the name of the company is Story, Storyy. Why are there two Y's? Because they're awesome. That's why. They are the company that you want to use for your social media content. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs know that if you want to be in business today, you've got to have social media content. You got to be producing small micro content for TikTok, for Reels, for YouTube Short. You've got to be putting that stuff out there. I was watching a TikTok video yesterday of this guy talking about, hey, these are all the tools I use to create my TikTok videos. And he went through this long list of things that he did and how much time it took to make it. And I thought, Why wouldn't he just use Story? Because Story does all that. Story gives you the prompt, so you know what you're talking about. Story will then take that through their app. They will edit the video, put in the images, they'll put in the hashtags, they'll write your description for you. They'll even post it and then retarget it to the people in your groups that you want to have that retargeted to, all for a very affordable price, an investment that will get you noticed. So if you're interested in making your social content better, go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. And again, that's STORYY. You get 10% off 3 months. You get to try it for free to see what it looks like, set up a consultation. They'll show you what it looks like. All of the stuff that I'm doing now is all on Story. So if you follow The Real Jason Duncan on social media, the stuff that you're seeing right now, Story is doing, and they're killing it. They're doing awesome for me. So I can't recommend them enough. And I love that they are the sponsor of EMS. All right, so back to our conversation. So if we are looking at how to invest in short-term rentals, what are some of the unexpected things that people need to think about? Because it's not all unicorns and roses. There are going to be there's still toilets involved in this, people. It's real estate. So like, what's the stuff that people need to think about? We're not scaring you away from doing it, but the reality of, hey, you do need to think about this.
Well, so the toilets and stuff are easy. You know, if a toilet breaks in my house in Tennessee, I'm going to do the exact same thing as if one breaks in my office behind me. I'm not going to go fix it myself. I don't know how to fix a toilet. I'm going to call somebody in either place. So that's, I would say, the part that people don't think about is that it is a service industry business. So if you have never waited tables or bartended or worked a front desk or worked in retail, you might have a little bit of a shock with dealing with all different types of personalities, because most people, 85% of people, are going to be totally pleasant to deal with and polite and just exactly what you would expect. But 15% of people are not cool. Probably more than 15% of people are just not cool. And they're going to be disrespectful. They're not necessarily, I've never in my entire career as a short-term rental investor had anybody like trash my house. I've had somebody accidentally catch the fence on fire, but it was an accident. But I've never had anybody be blatantly disrespectful to my property. But they will be disrespectful to you, or they will, ask. The people are difficult, is all I'm going to say. And it's part of the job. This is the business we have chosen, but you do have to kind of come at it from a service industry perspective. Like my husband and I were both in the bar industry in New York. So I've seen it all. I've dealt with all kinds of people, and it translates really well into managing a short-term rental. So just keep that in mind, that if you have up to this point not really ever been in a job or a position where you're dealing with a bunch of different personality types, welcome to short-term rental investing.
Yeah, we've heard the horror stories, and you actually have a short-term rental, long-term wealth Facebook group that once you become a client of the short-term shop, I think is how
well, that
works.
one's public. Yeah, the short-term rental, long-term wealth group is public. It's open to anybody who wants to learn more about short-term rental investing. Short-term shop buyers club is clients only. You got to be a client to get in that.
Okay, well, we need to get in that one, because I think whatever one that we're in, there's like 40,000 members.
Yeah, that's the public one.
Well, a little tip for you, like charge $5 a month for people to be a part of that. I would pay it. That's $200,000 a month.
Maybe I should.
You're
That's
welcome.
a great idea.
I'll take 10%.
I knew you can do that. How do you, well, let's talk about that. How you charge, like set up a monthly fee to be a member of
that's
Facebook
easy.
group.
That people do that all the time. There are all kinds of private
know this.
Facebook groups, and that people want to be in. Now, not all 40,000 people are going to stay in because they're cheap, but $5 and you got 40,000 people that want that data. I would do that.
I'm gonna look into that.
I'll help you out. You just let me know. But we saw we're in there, and people need to go look at it. But you can post a question. People post questions, and my wife was saying she just posted something yesterday about the furniture. The same thing I talked to you about. Hey, do we replace the furniture? Do we not? So she just posed that question to the group, because we're newbies, we don't know, and most of the answers were like, yes, you probably should, and here's why. Or, hey, if you can make the bet. They were reasonable. Then there's this one person.
There's always
why
one.
would you even ask that question? Replace it was like, why are you so rude?
That person wasn't Luke, was it?
No, it wasn't Luke. It wasn't Luke. but the group is great. We need to get into the buyers club, because I forgot that there's that other thing we need to get at. But you have one of the things that you guys do at Short Term Shop that I really like is that you provide resources. Once you close or get past the certain contingencies phase of the deal, you've got the Management Monday workshop that Luke, your husband, runs, and then you provide tons of documents and data that's really helpful. And what's funny is that we got that weeks ago when we went through Management Monday. And it wasn't until this morning we were sitting down and we'd gotten these bookings and we're trying to figure this crap out. We're trying to figure out rental agreements. How do we do it? And I'd forgotten. So I was texting Matt Castle, my real estate guy, like, hey, man, where do I find this? He goes, go to your Google Drive, or it was Dropbox or whatever it was. And I'm like, holy crap. And all this stuff was in there. And I'm like, the confirmed and adjourned email, which Luke had talked about. We're trying to figure out where that was. And it's perfect because our cabin's at the top of a mountain. It's 0.7 of a mile of a gravel drive that's pretty steep. It's not scary. It's just a steep road. And we put in our confirmed and adjourned letter that, hey, if you got a rear wheel drive car, this ain't for you. You can't do this. It's not going to be in any weather. It doesn't matter. It's not going to make it. But one person who booked got that letter and she wrote back, hey, I have a 2-wheel drive truck. Am I going to be okay? And we're like, yeah, you'll be fine. You just don't spin out. Like, just be very careful. But those types of resources that you're providing are things that the newbie who just goes out and hires Joe Bob, the real estate guy, to buy a house, they're not going to know any of this stuff. That's why working with somebody like you is really important. So what are some great success stories? You're an amazing success story. 6 years, $1 billion in sales. That's amazing. But $1 billion in 1 year, trailing 12 months. But what are some people that came to you like me 2 or 3 years ago? Give me a success story. You don't have to name them personally, but like, let's give some encouragement to people to think about, I could do that.
Well, while I'm thinking of a specific wonderful story, I will say that our average client ends up buying an average of 4 properties with us. So it's not, I would say over 50% end up buying 2. It's not as common that people only buy 1 property and then say, okay, this is it. I don't want any more or whatever. Or maybe they buy 1 property with us and then buy a second short-term rental in a market that we don't service. Most of our clients end up with more than 1 short-term rental because our goal is like to make sure that you're successful to come back and buy more properties with us. So that I think is a testament in and of itself. But we've got a lot of great stories. We've had people who are like, getting 1 or 2 properties has given them the ability to stay home with like an ill end of life parent, people with special needs kids that are now able to stay home or give them the resources that they weren't previously able to. There's any number of things. We've had lots of clients end up being able to, becoming financially independent and able to leave their W-2 jobs. We've had a lot of clients go on to be short-term rental influencers with their own courses and stuff. It's just kind of limitless. The sky's kind of the limit when it comes to short-term rentals. If you buy right, again, it's not all, rainbow unicorns and all that.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's always exceptions to the rule, but the short-term rental, and as your book says, long-term wealth, does provide long-term wealth in 2 ways, because you've got cash flow that should be happening frequently and ongoing if you're managing it correctly. But then long-term, you're having that appreciable asset, that asset that's going up in value over time, whether it's a cabin in the mountains like what we have, or it's a beach house like some of the other properties you've got. But this way to produce wealth for an entrepreneur, it doesn't require a ton of time. It's not set it and forget it. You do have to do work, but it can produce $5,000-$6,000 in extra cash flow for you if you have a property or 2 per month. That's fantastic. Now, you advocate for self-management as opposed to property management by hiring a property manager. Why is that?
Great question. So it's not like long-term property management. So all of my long-terms are with a property manager, 100%. But short terms, the amount of work versus the amount that they charge is not the same. So the average property management split for short-term rentals is 25% of your gross. And to give you guys some perspective on that, on 8 properties last year, If I'd paid somebody 25%, I would have paid somebody a little under $250,000 to do what we do from our phones with the help of a VA part-time that is offshore, that is not anywhere near $250,000. And that's not his only job for us. He does a lot of other stuff in terms of just admin with short-term shop stuff and our long-term investment. So only a small piece of his day is doing our short-term rentals. So as real estate investors or any kind of entrepreneur, I'm sure we can all come up with better things to do with $250,000 for what's probably, a $50,000 a year salary gig. So it just makes it really difficult to cash flow with a property manager. And I'm not saying that they're bad or wrong. There's a time and place for short-term rental property managers. If you're like done scaling, I've got all the properties that I need, I've got 27 apartment buildings and I've got my short terms, I'm done trying to grow, I'm just going to put this with a property manager and not pay attention anymore. I don't mind that I'm making less money. That's great. Perfect time for a property manager. But if you are like most of our clients, and like I have been and still am, using a property manager is just not going to be the way to get the most amount of money in your pocket so that you can scale your portfolio faster. If you're in the scaling phase, if you're in that bootstrapping phase of trying to just squeeze every last dollar out of a property so that you can go buy more properties, property manager is not the way to go.
Yeah, we've had one one property manager we were introduced to through, we hired a contractor to do some work, like rebuild the deck, and they, they're just being kind. Hey, we know a guy that does short-term stuff. You ought to talk to him. Well, he turns out to be, he's a property manager. He calls himself a co-host, which is fine. And he says, hey, I want 20%. And my wife, who's not an entrepreneur, I am the entrepreneur, she's not the entrepreneur, man. She's like, that doesn't sound like a bad deal. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Of course, she's the one who's ideally supposed to be taking on the responsibility of doing all that stuff. Although I've been drug into everything we've done so far, and I don't mind it. We're partners, we're team. I don't want to give up 20% because I know that the setup right now, it's taking a ton of time and energy and technology work that she doesn't know. Like there are things that I know as an entrepreneur, I know how to use VAs and I know how to use the technology. I know how to pull that stuff in that she's just not familiar with. It's taken us a lot of time to get it rolling, but I can imagine 2-3 months down the road, man, we're going to have this set. I love that you're using a VA for yours, because I use a VA in my businesses. I mean, my podcast manager is a VA in the Philippines. I've got a web developer who's in Bangladesh who helps me with my website. Like, I understand how to tap into those resources. So I think that self-management, I'm really glad that's what you advocate for, because that's what I had always wanted to do when I thought about doing it. And then when I found you and came to know you and said, I want to work with you, the fact that you continue to advocate for something that I thought was what I wanted to do is fantastic. So it doesn't take that much time. How many properties, in that example that you just gave, that it would have cost you $250,000, how many properties did you say? 8? Mm-hmm. So $1 million off 8 properties. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. That is, now what markets are yours?
Well, that's gross, that's not net. So correct. We've got the Smokies, we have Destin, 30A, and Cape San Blas, Florida.
Where's that? I don't know where that last one is.
Cape San Blas is on what's called the Forgotten Coast of Florida. It's just east of Panama City. So it goes Panama City, then Mexico Beach, then Port St. Joe. And then Cape San Blas is this it's a cape. It's like a peninsula off of Port St. Joe. And it's super cool. It's a little bit undiscovered in some ways, but in a lot of ways, it's definitely a vacation market in that, everything out there is a short-term rental and always has been for decades and decades. So it's super cool and laid back. There's 3 restaurants. They open when they feel like it. And there's one little trading post out there. There's not like a real grocery store. And but there's a lot of opportunity for short-term rental investors, because all the properties out there are on like 2 or 3 50-year-old mom and pop property management companies that don't use Airbnb and VRBO. So there's not a lot of great data on optimized properties. But if you're somebody like me, who's like, I know what I can do with a property, I don't need to see a ton of data anymore. I know that I can move in here and crush it. And we have, because all the properties out there aren't on Airbnb and Vrbo. Some of them are, but they're just not being well run. So somebody who knows how to use technology, who knows the right tools to use, can go in there and really crush it. And we have, and it's an awesome, ours is our house is there's no streets between us and the beach, but there's one house in front of us. And we paid half what that would have cost in Destin to be that close, or a third of what it would have cost to be on 30A that close. So it's really cool.
So Cape Sandblast?
Cape Sandblast, Sandblas.
Okay.
And we have short-term shop agents out there. So if you want to look into it.
Well, Florida is probably the next place we want to go. We want to do 4. My thought was a couple in the Smokies, because proximity, I can be there in 3 or 4 hours. Florida, that's a day-long drive for me to get down to Destiny. Well, it's 6 or 7 hours, but by the time you stop, it's a day-long drive. But also Nashville. What do you think about Nashville as a short-term market?
So having lived in Nashville and having had an office in Nashville briefly, we did have a short-term shop office. I shut it down because Nashville is a great place to make money on your property, but it's a terrible place to invest because the regulations for short-term rentals in Nashville are among the most volatile in the entire country. There's a few city council members that are just anti, and they've made up laws basically. So, first it was like, okay, it can only be these properties. And then it can only be this zoning, and the zonings kept getting smaller and smaller. And then they made a rule where any city council member can go into their territory. I forget what it's called, their district, and basically use a laser knife and cut out little sections to downzone. So basically what they can do is say, oh, we don't want short-term rentals right here, so we're going to make this X zone instead of the Y zone that it was, and just change it. So I shut it down because what was happening is the zonings got to be so small that obviously all the developers were snatching these things up and building short-term rental specific condo buildings and townhome developments. And what would happen is people would get under contract on these things pre-construction. Between the time they sign the contract and the time that the building's done, in a year, 2 years sometimes, the rules would change and they'd be stuck in this sometimes $1 million contract, and the builder's not letting them out when they can't short-term rent this property anymore. They could, it was allowed when they got under contract, but by the time it was done, the rules are changed. They can't do it. Well, then the developers are not letting anybody out of these contracts because they can't just dump whole developments worth of contracts. So it ended up being all of these lawsuits and threatened lawsuits. And I was like, I do not want to be a part of this anymore. I don't want to drag my clients into this anymore. Like, yes, there's money to be made, but at what cost? So we just shut it down.
Wow. I've got one personal friend who I know has a couple of properties here in Nashville, and they're over in the Germantown area, and they've got a rooftop where you can sit out and see downtown. It's kind of cool. And he seems to be doing okay with it. I haven't heard any horror stories from him, but I have heard murmurings about things like what you just said. And so we don't know. We're probably, at least a year away from making that investment, even if we do it at all. But the short-term shop will be the way that we go if we decide to do it. What is the best way to get in touch with the short-term shop?
So there's a number of ways. So fastest way is our website, theshorttermshop.com. There's a couple buttons you can click. One is instant agent. So if you don't feel like you need any help choosing a market, or you don't need to talk to me or anything, you just know, like, okay, I want to buy in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. You click the instant agent and we'll go ahead and connect you right then to our Broken Bow, Oklahoma agent. Or we have strquestions.com is a link to the Calendly that we have for this. Every Thursday, we have a public open to anybody Q&A with Luke and myself. I give a real quick presentation kind of addressing any FAQs, because there's a lot of questions that like every single person will ask. So I just boom, hit those in a presentation and then just let everybody ask us questions. So that's a really good place to get started. If you were like, oh, I don't know what market, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I know? Come talk to us on Thursdays, or, follow us on Instagram. I am the actual person checking the Instagram. It's at the short-term shop, and join our public Facebook group, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. I will not charge you $5 like Jason wants to right now, if you get in there quick.
She will, though. She's going to. She has to. There's no way you should not be doing that. It's too much. It's too valuable. Listen, answering one question is worth $5. Like one question.
Yeah, you're right about that.
I joined a mastermind not too long ago, and I was paying. Well, I won't tell what I was paying because it's nobody's business. But I was paying
Remember 20
four
grand, 50
figures
grand.
four figures per month to join this mastermind. And in one meeting, I got information that increased my revenue by mid six figures. Like I just asked one question and I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Bam. So you got to invest. And I think charging for access to that information is certainly not only appropriate, but I think it's even, it'll probably cull out the people that are rude. Right. Like these rude idiots aren't going to pay $5.
That's true.
They're idiots. So strquestions.com every Thursday you can get on there, and then the shorttermshop.com or at the short term shop. So what are the final pieces of advice as you're talking to an audience of people that are interested in doing short term? What are these other big pieces? What are the questions? Like you said, these are the 2 or 3 that happen every time. What are the pieces of advice that you could give as we kind of wrap our conversation up in this webinar?
So this is my personal advice. My way is not the right and only way. There are 1,000 ways to make money in real estate investing, but what's worked for me is sticking to investing in mature, regional, drivable vacation destinations. So what I mean by that is these are areas that short-term rentals have been a thing since before Airbnb existed. We're in 15 markets that are like this. So we're in, the Smokies, Myrtle Beach, all across Florida, really all across several states on the Gulf Coast, North Carolina mountains, a lot of different markets where it's been the normal thing for decades and decades and decades, since before the internet in a lot of cases. Like my grandmother's been vacationing, staying in short-term rentals in Destin since 1937. So these are areas that it's been the normal thing for all the tourism to stay in cabins, condos, beach houses, things like that, rather than hotels forever, since before Airbnb, since before the internet. So because of that, the areas are very short-term rental regulation friendly. The tourism is there, and the tourism has been through, most of these places been around since the 50s or earlier. It's been through all of the recessions and all of the wars and all the natural disasters, and it's still here. So these are very recession resistant. They're resilient markets. They haven't gone anywhere in the past 50 years. They're probably not going anywhere for the next 50 years. Very little hotel presence. And there's an underlying industry, so an infrastructure for you to find cleaners, handymen, things like that, because there have been short-term rentals there for so long that that's been the job for a long time. Whereas if you're buying in Starkville, Mississippi, where I'm from, there are a few successful short-term rentals there, but you're going to have to find a cleaner who's used to just cleaning someone's personal home and then convert them into knowing how to do a short-term rental turn. A turn is, a check-in, check-out window, and boom, 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 what they have to do, what their checklist is. So if you buy in the right market, it's going to make your life a lot easier, not only in terms of how much money you're going to make, how recession resistant it's going to be, but in terms of being able to find cleaners and handymen, knocking off that furniture expense like we talked about. So don't just run off and buy in any market that you think is cool or just next door to you because it's right there. Make sure you do your research and you're looking at all of those things. But the regional, drivable, mature vacation destination is where you want to buy, in my opinion.
So what markets are you in? You listed Smokies, Myrtle Beach, North Carolina mountains, lots of places around Florida. You said Broken Bow, Oklahoma.
So I have to go in a certain order in my brain to be able to list them all. So Smokies in Tennessee. We're in 2 mountain markets in mountain markets in North Carolina. That the high country, which is the Boone, Banner Elk, Blowing Rock, Sugar Beach Mountains area. Then we're in what I call the North Carolina side of the Smokies. So that's everywhere from Asheville down to Bryson City, like the entire southwestern corner of the state. And we're in 2 beach markets in North Carolina. We're in the Outer Banks. And then the other one is, we call it our Carolina Beach Market. So that's just all the other beaches in North Carolina that are not on the Outer Banks. Myrtle Beach, Blue Ridge, Georgia, Gulf Shores, Alabama, Broken Bow, Oklahoma, Galveston and Crystal Beach, Texas, and the Hill Country of Texas is our newest one, which is pretty exciting. Got a lot of ranches out there with some really pretty rivers and stuff. And then we're in 3 markets in Florida. So we're in the Emerald Coast, which is Destin, Panama City, 30A, Pensacola, basically from Panama City all the way to the Alabama line. And then our Gulf Shores Orange Beach agent picks up there. Then we're in east of the Emerald Coast in the Forgotten Coast, which is what we talked about earlier, Mexico Beach, Cape San Blas, Port St. Joe, and St. George Island. And then we are outside Orlando in what we call our Disney market, which is Davenport and Kissimmee, Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of markets.
Six
And we are
years, folks.
we're hiring in Shenandoah, Virginia. If anybody knows any agents that want to come work for the short-term shop, send them our way.
Shenandoah, VA. So
Yes.
6 years ago, when you were working in the 37 grand, what were you doing? What was your job?
I was a marketing manager for a music publishing company in Nashville.
$37,000 a year. So your story, my story is similar, although you made more money than me. But I was making when I took my leap into entrepreneurship, I was making 38 grand a year as a school teacher. So 37 grand to today, obviously a lot more money than that. I mean, we're talking you could pay somebody $250,000 just to manage 8 properties. So the list suffices to say there's a lot of money. Did you ever imagine this would happen?
No, I was just trying to make 100,000 a year, and I was going to be happy with that.
Oh, I think you're doing good, Avery. You're doing real good. I think you've made it.
We're
It's
gonna
all
make
right.
it. We're almost there.
All right. So short-term rentals, long-term wealth. Where can people get the book?
Amazon, Audible, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, and the Bigger Pockets bookstore, biggerpockets.com.
Is it as big as what it looks like on that shelf behind you, or is it smaller than that?
Nope. It's smaller than that. It's a real quick, easy read. You can read it in a few hours. No big deal.
Well, we need to pick that up. I've had you on I've had you on my podcast, and I've had you on my webinar, and I still haven't read it. But now I have even more reason to read it because we now have this big, expensive asset sitting on the mountain that I need to figure out how to produce cash. So I need to go pick that up before too long and read it. Well, Avery, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you sharing your insight into what short-term rentals can do. And we can, as investors, make millions of dollars, and we can live our best life because we can get that cash flow, that passive, although not truly passive, but
Right.
but there is a passive element to it where you're not working. You could work from where you want to. You're not working every day where you have to create generational wealth. And I love that you said that, the generational wealth, because this does change generations and it makes an impact. And I'm very happy to know you. At some point we've got to be in the same room together, because we've talked on the Zooms a lot. We've never been in the same room together. We need to figure out how to make that happen, but highly recommend the short-term shop to everybody listening. And if you if you weren't here live for the webinar and you like this type of stuff, go to therealjasonduncan.com/EMS and sign up for the next one. We've got the next one actually coming up is 3 ways your brain is keeping you poor and how to change it today. And my guest expert is Dr. Justin Mosley. He's the mindset doctor. He's a leading expert in professional transformation. And he speaks regularly about reprogramming your subconscious mind for success, overcoming self-doubt, develop confidence, finding purpose, etc. He's a great friend of mine. He's actually lives local here to Nashville. And we met through my podcast. We live in the same town and didn't know each other. He's going to be my guest, and that's coming up next. Let's see, it's going to be on, what is that? Next night, the 19th. That's next Wednesday, October 19th at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. If you want to register, again, go to therealjasonduncan.com/EMS. So Avery, I'm going to let you turn your camera off. I've got a couple of things I got to say to everybody before we go. So everybody, if this is something that you're interested in, I want to ask one last question before we let everybody go. How much is knowing when you could exit your business worth to you? I mean, if you could know exactly when you could step away from daily operations and have that business provide you financial independence for the rest of your life, wouldn't you like to know when that could happen? Well, you can find out by taking my free exit readiness survey. It's an assessment that you can take at amireadytoexit.com. At amireadytoexit.com. You go take it. It's only about 20 questions. It only takes a couple of minutes, and you get a free report on how close you are to exiting the daily operations of your business. And one lucky person who goes to that and takes that assessment today or tomorrow, when this thing comes out, will, in the next 24 hours, you will get 50% off my upcoming Business Accelerator group coaching cohort that starts on October the 27th. That's a $4,000 value. So all you got to do is go take the free assessment, and I'm going to do a drawing. One person who takes that, I'll reach out and say, hey, you've earned 50% off my next Business Accelerator. That's a $4,000 value. So if that's something you want to do, go to amireadytoexit.com. Well, I'm the real Jason Duncan. She was Avery Carl. Jesus is King, and I'll see you on the next webinar.